Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Personal and Social Awareness with Professor Glass. All right, so welcome to this week's chapter, which is chapter 6, and it is all about love. Okay, I'm going to go through some ideas of love. What is love? What's the scientific view of love? And then we're going to talk about self-love and the importance of self-love. All right, so first let's jump in here. What is love? Now, the reality is that love is a complex, abstract idea that is hard for us to define, which is why, as humans, we have spent so much time trying to gain an understanding of this experience of love. I mean, humans have written a lot about love. We have plays and poems and stories and movies and TV shows and music and just about any type of media you could think of. I mean, we have a holiday that is pretty much just dedicated to the idea of loving others, right? Valentine's Day, showing the people who are important to us like that we love them and we care for them, right? Archaeologists have found that the oldest love poem can be traced back to the Sumerians sometime during like 2037 BC, which makes that this love poem is roughly around 4,000 years old. Like that's pretty old. Okay, it was actually etched on a clay tablet in cuneiform, and which is a written language using symbols, and believed to have been recited by a bride of the Sumerian king Shusin. And it was recited during at least this is what archaeologists believe, it was recited during a sacred rite called sacred marriage, in which the king would symbolically marry the goddess Inanna, okay, and then mate with her and ensure fertility and prosperity for everyone, okay, for the kingdom for the coming year. Now, 4,000 years old, that's a long time ago. And if we take into account that archaeology suggests that written word emerged around 6,000 years ago, we can deduce that the experience of love was spoken long before it was written. Okay, spoken word is about 50 to 100,000 years old. So this idea of love has been around for a long time. This experience of love has been around for a long time, right? And yet we still don't fully understand it. We have all these like idioms in our language, right? Love is blind. Okay, you only hurt the ones you love. Love is unconditional. Love knows no bounds. Our love is stronger than 1,000 swords, right? Like love just brings so much passion to us. Okay, our experience as humans, it brings so much passion, right? And can also bring so much heartache and pain as well. But it can bring so much pleasure as well. So it's just such a complex idea, all right? And the authors of the textbook do a great job at defining like many elements of what they call authentic love and unauthentic love. And honestly, it's hard to find more to say because they do such an amazing job, but I'm going to take a stab at it. And it's probably going to be a little repetitive to the textbook as well. But to me, love means a willingness to trust others, a willingness to trust and be trusted, a willingness to be vulnerable with somebody, opening oneself up for the potential that maybe they may get hurt, taking that risk, being introspective, that willingness to grow, that willingness to look within oneself and say, oh yeah, I can see where maybe I need to like work on that and change. To be understanding of the other person, understanding within like relationships and within love with other people is so important. Okay, to be open and flexible, a willingness to be influenced by others, and the willingness to build a life together side by side. Right? To me, that describes many elements of love. And the reality is that in the end, in order to keep and maintain love, it's about our choice, right? Like the beginning phase of love, which we call limerence, it fades typically within like 6 months. It fades. That feeling, it will fade. It gets dimmer. It's very strong in the beginning, but it gets dimmer. And then we're left without these really strong emotional feelings towards the person. And often this is like when people start to see these red flags, like kind of set things off. And so 6 months is often like that area where people are like, ooh, I don't know about this relationship anymore, because their limerence period has faded. But it's at this time also where we also need to make this choice, right? We have to choose love if we want to choose love, right? So, and we make these choices to include all the ingredients that both Crooks and Bauer and Gottman, okay, who are two researchers who have researched this idea of love and relationships, right? We have to include the things that they talk about, that they identify to be these beneficial ingredients for a long-term loving relationship. Things like choosing self-acceptance, acceptance by one's partner, choosing to appreciate the other person, okay? Appreciation of each other, really. Because appreciation does require choice on our part. Choosing to have equality in decision making, having effective communication. Okay, we're not always good with our communication skills, and we have to make a conscious choice to effectively communicate with each other, to make that choice to commit. Okay, as the individuals in the relationship see it, make the commitment, set realistic expectations of each other. The ability to let go of resentments. This can be a huge one, and it's a choice. The individual has to make the choice. Often, in order to help let go of resentments, we have to make the choice to show gratitude. And when we choose gratitude, our resentments dwindle and fade. Okay. Shared interest with each other, shared dreams and goals, okay, and the ability to manage conflict effectively. All right, John and Julie Gottman are some of the most well-known researchers of relationships and love. All right, and the Gottmans decided to take a different approach to studying love and relationships than many other researchers. They wanted to look at the characteristics of successful, healthy relationships, what they actually tend to call masters of relationships. So throughout their 30 plus years of research using what they coined the Love Lab, all right, they found many characteristics of successful relationships. What are the masters of relationships doing? That's what they looked at. The Love Lab is an apartment that they have in San Francisco where the Gottmans would invite couples to come to for like a weekend or stay for like a week, and they would observe and record their behaviors. And they would also conduct these face-to-face interviews with them, gathering all kinds of data, right, through their research. And they've been doing this for, I think they're going on almost 38, 39 years now, right? And that's a long time. That's a lot of data. And they've written numerous books. They published a lot of like research articles. They have done lots of speaking engagements. They created their own couples therapy. It's called Gottman Couples Therapy. And they've just done so much more. TED Talks, like all these things. So the way I see it is if they've researched love and relationships this much, then if we really want to understand how to have a successful relationship, the Gottmans are who we turn to. They have the answers. Okay. Now, In their book called The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work, all right, Gottman and another researcher, Silver, describes some very key characteristics of a successful relationship. And we're going to go through these. We're going to go through these like key characteristics on how, like, what are the masters of relationships doing? All right. And how we can learn from them and apply these things to our own relationships. So first, intimate familiarity. The couples share intimate details with each other. They share their goals, their hopes, their dreams, and their concerns, their worries and their fears. They get close intimately with each other. And I'm not talking about physical intimacy. I'm talking about this emotional, cognitive, spiritual intimacy with one another. They know each other, okay? Fondness and admiration, right? Couples who feel honor and respect for one another can more easily recover and revitalize their relationship when they have like problems or conflicts, right? That's that like appreciation and gratitude, okay? Admiring each other for what they do, what they bring to the relationship, having a fondness, being able to look at one's partner and go, man, I'm lucky, right? Next is connectedness. So when individuals honor each other, they are generally able to appreciate each other's perspective. So they can listen to one another. They can talk about things and share things and respect each other's perspective. Okay. A shared sense of power. This is like that equality in decision making. So when couples disagree, they look for common ground rather than insisting their way is the right way. You actually look for this like shared idea, this almost compromise, if you would, right? So while we may disagree in our relationships, it doesn't mean that our disagreements have to be absolutely separate from each other, or that one's view and one's perspective is the supreme over the other. Each individual is entitled to their own perspective. Masters of relationships will actually look for common ground that they can share with each other, that they can connect with each other. Shared goals. Partners incorporate each other's goals into their concept of what their intimate relationship is about. They share their goals through their intimate connection, and then each partner tries to integrate those goals into the relationship, into what is happening. Okay, so that each individual is reaching the goal that they would like, that they intend to reach. And then open communication. So effective and open communication is very important in a relationship. Each person in the relationship is able to talk fully and honestly about their convictions and their core beliefs without feeling judged or persecuted, demeaned, or criticized. That's open communication, creating a safer space for each individual to be vulnerable with each other, be open with each other. Okay. This is very important in a relationship. Now, Gottman also did look at some of the negative things that were happening in a relationship, especially when it comes to communication patterns. And so Gottman found 4 negative communication patterns, which he refers to as the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And the idea here and what he has found in the research is that if a moderate or higher level of these communication patterns exists in a relationship, this relationship is doomed to fail. It is doomed to deteriorate and fail. Okay. Most often, these 4 horsemen of the apocalypse come out during conflict. They come out during arguing. Okay. So we have criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. The worst one of these, they're all pretty bad, but the worst one is contempt. Contempt is viewing the other person as if they are less than, viewing them like they are a second-class citizen, viewing the individual as, oh, they're not as smart as I am. They don't make as much money as I do. Okay. Like this, well, I'm better than they are, and I treat them that way. That's contempt. And it is one of the most damaging of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Okay. Now, in no particular order from here, we have criticism, which is the criticizing of one individual, right? So either pointing out their faults, blaming them for things, criticizing them when they complete tasks, things like that. Okay. And then there's defensiveness, where the individual often responds to criticism by defending themselves, or they respond to when their partner is trying to get them to take something accountable or to be introspective. They defend, they defend, they defend, they defend, right? And so this defensiveness creates this wedge, it creates this distance. And then there's stonewalling. And stonewalling is just when the individual just checks out. They shut down. Okay. Often stonewalling can come from contentment. Okay. It can come from criticism. All right. But let's say you have a couple, they're arguing with each other. One is just throwing all kinds of criticism. The other one is trying to speak up and say something, but they keep getting knocked down, or there's this contempt coming at them. Then that person may end up just checking out, and it's kind of this idea of, well, nothing I'm doing is any good. It's not working. The other person's not listening to me. I have no power in a way. So they just check out. Okay. And then Gottman also identifies some key tasks of successful relationship, right, in one of his other books. And these key tasks are build friendship and intimacy in the relationship. Learn to manage conflict effectively rather than always trying to resolve the conflict, because there are conflicts that will not be resolved. And it is better to try to manage the conflict effectively rather than always trying to resolve it, because sometimes they can't be resolved. He talks about what are called perpetual problems or perpetual conflicts in a relationship. Sometimes the same things are going to just repeat themselves again and again and again in a relationship because of the differences of perspectives and viewpoints. Now, just because there are perpetual problems doesn't mean that the relationship can't work. It just means that each individual has to learn how to manage that conflict more effectively, because maybe it won't get resolved. Most likely it won't, actually. Process any past emotional wounds with the goal of understanding one another's perceptions, right? This is this understanding of the other person, okay? Getting to look at that person and say, I get you. Like, I understand you now, right? And part of that is processing emotional wounds. It doesn't mean that we go and dump everything that on our partner. That's not what this means. But we do want to process our emotional wounds so that we can start to gain an understanding of ourselves and of our partners. Okay. John Gottman always says, he says, everybody comes with baggage. Everybody. Okay. We just have to learn what baggage we're willing to accept, what baggage we're willing to take on, and potentially process and heal. Right. So, but everybody comes with baggage. This idea of trying to find someone who doesn't have baggage, that's really going to be challenging to find. Okay. Everybody's bringing something. Some people have more, some people have less, but everybody's bringing something. Now, this doesn't mean that the individual is settling because they're trying to find someone with like no baggage. And so then they settle for the person with some baggage. I hate that term, settling. I hate that idea. Well, I'm just going to, I don't want to settle. And honestly, if you really think about it, like this idea that like, I don't want to settle for anything less than what I am looking for. Like, I get it, but at the same time, that perception can make things even harder because somebody is going to settle for you, right? Like someone's going to settle for whatever that person who's thinking that. And it's not really settling. It's just, what are we willing to accept? Because again, everyone's going to come in with some baggage. Everyone's going to come in with something. So we have to like start deciding, well, what are we going to accept and how willing are we to work to understand our partner and have this appreciation and this gratitude. Okay. Next one, honor your partner's dreams and make life dreams come true. Honor what your partner wants in their life. Honor it, respect it, and help them achieve it if you can, right? Create shared meaning in the relationship. Creating shared meaning is like just when we talk about our hopes and our dreams and we talk about things that we want and we share our emotions with each other and we share our thoughts with each other and we talk about the strength of our relationship and we create this shared meaning, this shared life with one another. Next, learn about and practice building trust, commitment, and loyalty. These are three vital things and vital things that we need in a relationship. But often we have to like practice and build these things. We have to work at creating trust, commitment, and loyalty in our relationship. And often the first way to actually start doing this is to ask our partners, what does trust mean to you? What does commitment look like? How can I be loyal? How can I show my loyalty? Asking questions about what our partner thinks these, like what these terms mean to them. What is their perspective? And that's very important because it helps us to gain that understanding. And once we can understand like what trust means to our partner and how do they actually experience trust and see it, then we can actually help to build that trust. Now, these are just some of the things that the Gottmans have found during their research. And in the end, Gottman would agree that love is a complex human experience that moves through various stages, and every stage, individuals are going to run into these periods where they have to make choices. Do I choose to hold the resentment, or do I choose to show gratitude and let the resentment go? Okay. And here's the thing is these choices that are being made can either strengthen the relationship or weaken the relationship. But the choice is on us. Okay. All right, moving on. So another researcher focused on developing a scientific way of understanding love is Robert Sternberg. And through Sternberg's research, he created what he calls the triangular theory of love. The theory suggests that love can be understood in terms of three specific components. So the three are intimacy, passion, and decision or commitment. Okay. And so intimacy refers to the feelings of closeness, connectedness, and bondness in loving relationships. It thus includes within its purview these feelings that give rise essentially to the experience of warmth in a loving relationship. Okay. It's not just about this physical intimacy, right? And these feelings of closeness, the feelings of connectedness, the bonding through sharing with each other, being vulnerable, having that emotional connection, that spiritual connection, that cognitive connection. That's intimacy. Passion is going to refer to the drive that leads the romance. This is the physical attraction. This is the sexual consummation and related phenomenon in our loving relationships and our experiences. The passion component, okay, includes those sources of motivational and other forms of arousal that lead to the experience of passion in the loving relationship. So what actually brings us to want these things, to desire, if you would, right? To seek out the romance, to seek out like sex. Okay, that's passion. And then decision or commitment refers either in short term to the decision that one loves like the other. So the decision they're making to love the other, like another person. And in the long term, it's one's commitment to maintain that love. Okay, so according to Sternberg, it starts with a decision to love the other, and then it moves into a commitment to maintain that love. Now, the belief that Sternberg has is that these components can either stand alone or be combined and create like a particular love, okay, or a particular type of relationship. So if we go through these, so non-love, okay, these are his labels that he uses. Non-love refers simply to the absence of all three components. And if you think of it, it's going to be in like a triangle, all right, with all three components. Non-love, none of them. Liking results when one experiences only the intimacy component of love, and it has the absence of passion and commitment. Infatuated love, okay, comes from experiencing only passion, okay, and it has the absence of the other two. Empty love, okay, comes from the decision that one loves another and is committed to that love, but has no intimacy and has no passion. We may often hear people say, well, we stayed together for the kids. Okay, they committed to the relationship, but they did not have the intimacy and the passion. Romantic love derives from a combination of intimacy and passion. It lacks the commitment aspect, okay? And often this is how like the beginning of relationships may start, is intimacy and passion. Desire to physically be with this individual and also to share and be vulnerable with this individual. And then often that leads to creating commitment as well. All right, companionate love derives from a combination of intimacy and commitment. All right, it lacks the passion side of it, but it's intimacy and commitment. We may actually see this in like older couples, right, where maybe passion physically has dwindled, but they are still committed to each other and they still are vulnerable and share things with one another. All right. Now, and then there's fatuous love, which results from the combination of passion and commitment, but it's missing intimacy. So there's this strong physical desire, and there's this willingness to commit to the relationship as one has defined it, or as the relationship has defined it. But there is this lack of willingness to be vulnerable and be open and share and that emotional connectedness and that spiritual connectedness and that cognitive connectedness. And last is consummate. This is what Sternberg referred to as the complete love. There's a full combination of all three components. All right. Now, although all three components are important parts of loving relationships, their importance may differ from one relationship to another. All right. So what may be important in one relationship may not be as important in another relationship, or it may change over time. Right. So like if we're talking about just a sequence of events, so people, let's say two people meet and they develop romantic love, which is that intimacy and compassion. They haven't decided on a commitment yet, but they have intimacy and compassion for one another. They want to be around each other and they want to share everything with each other. And in the beginning of the relationship, it feels great, it feels wonderful. Okay. And then at some point, they make a commitment for each other. But let's say on one side, okay, let's say person A. For person A, they may have had romantic love at the beginning, but then when they add the commitment part of it, it actually shifts, okay, into, let's say, more of a fatuous love. So the intimacy aspect actually goes away. And now they're just focused on passion and commitment. So they kind of stop sharing as much with the person. They stop having these deeper conversations with the person. They stop talking about their hopes and dreams and connecting with the individual, right? They're committed to the relationship as they've defined it, and they desire physically to be with this person, but they have removed the intimacy aspect, right? And then through time, things start to change, and maybe they start getting older, or, maybe like that relationship goes through some rough patches. And then that person tries to move into the consummate, where they start adding that person A starts adding the intimacy element back into their relationship. And now they're developing consummate love. And let's say they experience consummate love for a good while now, right? They made it through the rough patches, and now they're experiencing consummate love towards their partner. And I say person A towards their partner because each person is showing their own love. They're experiencing their own experience of love in that relationship. And so as they get older and life just starts taking its wear and on them, and physically maybe they cannot experience that passion as much as they used to. So that aspect of it starts to kind of dwindle and die, right? It starts to dwindle and go away a little bit. Okay. So now they move out of consummate love and they move into companionate love, which is intimacy and commitment. So they're still sharing and connecting and bonding with their partner. They're still committed to the relationship, but they've lost that part of the passion physically because they are unable to do it. Okay. So you can see how it can move through time and change. Right. And the reality is no relationship is likely to be a pure case of any of these like love labels that Sternberg has given. It's more like, oh, this one is pretty close to, let's say, companionate love, or this one is pretty close to romantic love. Okay. But nothing is really going to be like 100% pure. All right. All right. One more researcher to discuss, John Lee. So in 1976, Lee researched the question, what does love mean? And Lee conducted like many interviews with many individuals trying to search and get these qualitative answers, okay, to what does love mean, that question. And so what his research actually found is that people define and show love in a variety of ways, many different ways. And depending upon who the person is, how close they are, depending upon how they view the relation, like there's just so many different ways that individuals actually define and show love. So Lee created what he calls the 6 styles of love. And he uses the Greek nouns for love because in Greek language, right, in Greek, there are actually multiple terms for love. And so John Lee uses the Greek nouns to describe the 6 styles of love. And we can go through this now. So the first one is eros. And eros is the passionate love, right? I want to be around this person so much. I just desire to talk to them and see them, right? That's eros. Ludus, okay, or ludo, is player. That's player love. All right. This is the I just want to have fun. I just want to like get out there and just kind of, just see what's out there and just have a little fun. And I'm not committed to anything. And not that I have a strong passion for anybody, but I'm just, dating a couple people at one time, that kind of love. And then we have storge, which is like friend love. Okay. So I love this individual as my friend. That's Storge. Mania is what Lee refers to as the infatuation love. The I'm going to slash your tires love. Okay, so mania is that one. And then there's pragma, which is the practical style of love, right? The more rational, almost business-like style of love. And then the last one is agape. And agape is the selfless love, the idea that I will, like the individual will just give love freely, okay, and want nothing in return, right? It's about showing love toward the other person, even at the expense of themselves. Okay, that's the agape love. And if you're interested, I'm going to post this week's write-up, okay, for this video. And there's a hyperlink on there that you can actually go and actually take the quiz and see which one of these you actually have. Interestingly enough, Lee did discover that often people of particular ones, like let's say like pragma. So pragma, they often look for partners who are also pragma, okay? So some of these actually look specifically for partners who fit them well. Now, mania doesn't always look for someone who is mania. That's not the way it works, right? But people often will look for partners who match their style of love better, all right? All right, so moving on from love, let's actually talk about self-love. Now, my belief is that self-love is important for us in our life because without it, we often experience many issues, right? So individuals who lack self-love have difficulty with creating and maintaining appropriate boundaries with others, creating and keeping their own limits for themselves. People lacking self-love often say yes to things when they really want to say no. And in the end, people who lack self-love will often put up barriers to being loved or find ways to sabotage their own relationships, okay? And generally that comes from the belief that if they don't love themselves, and maybe it's not like an actual thought they're having, but often it comes from this feeling, right? Like if they don't love themselves, then how could anyone love them? Okay. Or they seek out to try to find ways to help themselves to feel lovable. And that can be destructive. That can be a problem because then we are putting other people's needs ahead of our own in order to make ourselves feel loved or feel lovable. And that can create like a destructive pattern, all right? In fact, a therapist by the name of Ross Rosenberg, he gathered research that led him to an understanding of like this lack of self-love. And he coined the term self-love deficiency disorder, SLDD. It also goes by the term of codependency. You may have heard that before. Codependency, this idea of I will put others ahead of my own, like I will put others ahead of myself so that I can feel wanted and loved. All right, that's just like a quick watered down version of codependency. Now, Rosenberg actually believes that the behaviors of codependency are a symptom of SLDD, self-love deficiency disorder. Okay. Now, according to Rosenberg's theory, he postulates that SLDD comes from an attachment trauma that one experiences during childhood. All right. This could be neglect or abuse, or this could be not bonding well with one's primary caregiver, having an insecure attachment, which we talked about with like Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, and they talked about it again in this chapter. Right. And the attachment trauma creates the message and the belief that one is fundamentally bad or flawed. So it becomes this like core belief within the individual. And what he calls this is core shame. Okay. Shame and guilt are different from each other. Guilt is the belief that my behavior at this moment was bad. And so I feel guilty for that behavior. Shame is the belief I am inherently bad. I am flawed. There is something wrong with me. That's shame. Okay. And so he calls this core shame. And from the core shame comes a deep, aching pain of worthlessness and loneliness, according to Rosenberg. And this leads to codependency addiction, the need to help others, the need to take care of others, the need to put others ahead of oneself. Okay, that's codependency addiction. So the need to put others ahead of oneself in order to experience love, feel lovable, feel wanted. All right. He also says that it's a desperate need of a relationship that will make the lonely pain go away. And all of this integrates into self-love deficiency disorder, SLDD, which is one's selfless, compulsive caretaking need. And the individual then uses this caretaking in an attempt to try to control or manipulate others into loving them. Okay. And I know that it sounds a little complex, but if you read up more on it, you will definitely start to understand what he is saying. All right. But self-love deficiency disorder is that the individual does not have their own self-love. So they're basically seeking ways to try to feel love. And often it comes through caretaking. It comes through taking care of somebody else, putting somebody else ahead of their own needs, ahead of themselves. And thereby their expectation, okay, or we can call this the covert contract, right? So it's a contract they're making with the other person that by caretaking for them or caring for them and putting their own needs ahead, like putting the other person's needs ahead of their own, that means that that person will now show love to them. And if they don't, then it creates all this, like all these issues for them. Now, Rosenberg details all of this in his book that he titled The Human Magnet Syndrome. Okay. Magnets, like particular personalities, are attracted to each other. And so during his research, Rosenberg discovered that there was a pattern of mate selection among self-love deficiency disorder individuals. He found that often an individual with SLDD would find a strong connection to an individual that he would define as a pathological narcissist. So what he's saying is individuals who are experiencing SLDD often find a strong connection with a pathological narcissist. What's interesting about this relationship is the individual who has SLDD or is experiencing SLDD, they want to care for another person so that they feel loved. So they offer their services to another person, right? They offer to listen to them and empathize with them and care for them and do things for them in order to experience that love. A pathological narcissist loves that kind of attention. They desire and want that attention. It makes them feel amazing. Okay. So when these two people meet, right, the pathological narcissist is saying, whew, look at this person listens to everything that I say. They're hanging on every word. I'm only talking about myself. I'm loving this. And the person who's experiencing SLDD is like, oh, look how happy they are that I'm caring for them and that I'm listening to them and that I'm here for them. Bam, right? Now you have the magnetic connection. Okay. Now, pathological narcissist, according to Rosenberg, is that this is an individual who is selfish, self-consumed, demanding, entitled, and controlling. They are exploitive of people. Okay. And they're exploitive of people who rarely or selectively reciprocate any form of generosity towards them. Right? So basically, they want to use the individual that is not going to ask for anything in return. And what's really interesting is the moment that like this SLDD individual starts to heal and starts to maybe ask for their own needs to be met and starts to ask for things in return, the pathological narcissist cannot handle that. It really freaks them out. Okay. And then they start using other controlling and manipulating behaviors to try to keep the SLDD in the position they want them to be in. All right. Now, pathological narcissists can show empathy and they can show sensitivity, but they only do that, okay, when there are tangible rewards for themselves and or when it makes them feel valued, important, or appreciated. So sometimes that gives us this like, there's like this falseness that's occurring. And so the individual, the person who may be experiencing SLDD in the relationship goes, but they do empathize with me sometimes and they are sensitive to me sometimes. But often it's goal oriented. There is a reason behind it. It is not happening just because, okay? I also posted a hyperlink to Ross Rosenberg's like website where you can find a wealth of information about this human magnet syndrome and SLDD. Now, the question that comes up with all of this is how does one with SLDD actually like heal? Now, in my own work as a therapist, I found that when I work with my clients, one way to start working on it is to develop a stronger self-esteem. Because what I have seen is that self-esteem and self-love are often like connected to each other. And so by increasing one's self-esteem, right, that's like the best start on the path of developing a stronger sense of self-love. Now, I posted something on Canvas from Dr. Burns that discusses like how to improve one's self-esteem and thereby improving one's self-love. Because as an individual develops a stronger sense of self-esteem, then they also need to start developing a stronger sense of self. And referring back to Bowenian theory, when we talk about a sense of self, a strong sense of self is the individual that is not persuaded by others as much. Okay, they know who they are, they're happy with who they are, and that's who they're going to be. Not that they're unwilling to grow, they're very willing to grow. But they're not going to be this like piece of driftwood that is just being pushed around and told what to do and told how to be and how to think and all that. Okay. They're also not going to be influenced by other people's anxiety and other people's like feelings. All right. They have a strong sense of self. Doesn't mean they're not willing to help. They are willing to help. Okay. But they keep themselves, they keep their boundaries up and they keep their limits up. Because a strong sense of self comes from boundary setting and limit setting. And let's talk about boundary setting and limit setting, okay? Now I'm going to use the whiteboard in order to talk about boundary setting and limit setting. So boundaries, and this is how I define things. This is what I worked with my clients on when I was a therapist. All right. Boundaries are the things that we set for others. These are the things that we don't want individuals to like cross. Okay. We don't want people to, let's say, treat us poorly or talk to us in specific ways or discount our needs, right? So like, so when I set boundaries, I often start with, I will not allow others to, and then that would be my boundary. Or I will allow others to, and then that would be my boundary, okay? So this outside portion here are our boundaries, which are what we set for others. Then inside, So inside here are going to be our limits. Now limits, to me, when I talk about limits, what I'm referring to are what we will allow ourselves, okay? So what we actually allow ourselves. So a limit, which is the inner circle, is I will allow myself to, or I will not allow myself to, and then finish the sentence, okay? So I will allow myself to be loved. I will not allow others to treat me as if I am worthless. I will allow myself to express my needs. I will not allow others to diminish my needs. So these are limits and these are boundaries. All of this helps to create a stronger sense of self, okay? And as we create this stronger sense of self, it helps us, right? It helps us like develop that stronger self-esteem and that stronger self-love. It helps us know who we are, and it helps us understand who we are in relation to others. Okay, we know where the snake ends, right? Or we know where we begin and others begin. We know where we end and others end, right? And it just helps create a stronger sense of self, okay? And of course, this can be cultural, right? So depending upon one's culture, like an individualistic culture tends to have believe in a much stronger sense of self. And in a more collectivistic culture, it often believes in a less strong sense of self. It is your choice how you are going to create this. But if one is experiencing issues in a relationship, one place to start is the self-love, the self-esteem, and the sense of self, and creating boundaries and limits for one another, or for yourself and others. Now from here, we would use the CBT techniques that were discussed in previous lectures, right? And we would start using these like techniques, and we would start doing things like the daily mood log and challenging our cognitive distortions and thinking about like the cost and benefit of like what we believe or what we are behaving or how we're behaving, things like that. All right. Now next week we're going to have a similar discussion, but it's going to be about more about relationships. All right, we're going to take some assessments and stuff like that, and we're going to get into a lot of like interesting things about relationships. All right, so once again, if you enjoyed, please leave a comment below, generate a discussion. I'd love to jump in and have a discussion about this if you'd like to, but it's up to you. All right, so make sure to like, share, and subscribe. So I hope you are all enjoying these videos though.